All right, we are discussing the flood. Actually, we have come through the flood, and we are come into chapter 10 last week, and we're going to continue in that. But first off, let's look at Noah in the New Testament just very, very quickly. There are some things in the New Testament. Well, actually, there are a lot of things in the New Testament that will use the Old Testament as a principle. Use the Old Testament as an example of something, as a principle of something. Use the Old Testament as a way to explain something in the New with types and shadows, but not just that way. And I give you this challenge because it's true. There's not a single major doctrine in the New Testament, not a single major doctrine in the New Testament where the New Testament does not use the Old Testament in some way. Hebrews 11, concerning faith. Now, faith isn't just a New Testament doctrine, by no means, but Hebrews chapter 11, you have going from Abel, all Enoch and to Seth and Enoch and Noah, and you have all of those that are present there. These are people from the Old Testament. And of course, you have Noah there as well. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Now, we just want to make note of this. This is Noah in the New Testament. That by faith, Noah is warned. All right, but it isn't, he found grace in the sight of God before he is warned. He is living faithfully, and that's why God is going to warn him, because he is raising his children. He's raising his sons properly, or he would raise them properly. By faith, Noah is divinely warned of the things not yet seen. There is faith. Where is the evidence of a flood? Before there was a flood, where's the evidence of it? There was no evidence. There's no evidence that there would be a flood, other than God said there would be a flood. And he believed God because he prepared, he was moved with godly fear. Godly fear is associated with faith. Prepared an ark for the saving of his household. Now look at this, by which he condemned the world. He condemned the world, or did God condemn the world? Well, God condemned the world, yes. But with Noah's obedience, that is judgment on the world. That is judgment. That he judged God faithful. He judged God as speaking the truth. And he took the warning, and he took it wholeheartedly to the point of which he's going to take 120 years and build this ark. He's going to take all that time and build the ark. And it's going to save his household. And he does condemn the world by obeying God. They chose not to obey. He chose to obey. He condemns the world in doing such a thing. And he becomes the heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Now, we go to 1 Peter chapter 3. That last bit, Hebrews 11, it's a discussion on faith. This happens to be a discussion on baptism and types and shadows. That the flood is for a foreshadowing of another type of salvation that Noah wouldn't see. In fact, Noah's children wouldn't see until we get to John the Baptist and the teaching of Christ. We don't see this until we get through time. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. By whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. Now, notice, you have the divine long-suffering. He's waiting for what? He's waiting for the ark to be finished. And he knows it's going to take time for Noah and whoever's helping him, because this is more than one man job, whoever's helping him, I can think we can safely assume his sons are going to be helping him, and as much as possible, all their wives are going to be helping them. And could anyone else have been hired? I don't know why not. It is very, very possible. I can't say one way or the other. It doesn't say that he didn't or that he did, but it's possible. At any rate, in which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. God has this patience, has this long suffering with all the wickedness that's going on in the world, every bit of wickedness that is there, waiting for the ark to be prepared. And Noah, as we read, did everything precisely as he was called to do. He did everything. Now, we come to verse 21. There is also an antitype which now saves us. Baptism. There is that, what you saw concerning the ark, did that save people? Yes, it just said save people through water. Did it save people? Yes. There is now another way in which mankind is saved, and it's easier than building an ark. An ark took over 100 years, I think we can safely assume, to prepare for all of that, get it ready, and that we have now this is a lot simpler than that. It doesn't take that long. We see places such as Acts chapter 2, about 3,000 were added to them that day, added to the church that day. We see someone, they're saved. And how were they saved? They were baptized. They did precisely what Peter said they were supposed to do. Repent and be baptized, every one of you. That's precisely what he told them they must do. And this foreshadows, this is a foreshadowing of salvation that would come. And that is the Noah and the ark. Baptism. There is also an antitype which now saves us. Now saves us. You can't get around those words. And even if you manage to do it, you've got a lot more scripture you've got to get around. You've got many more scriptures you've got to get around. But it's explaining not the removal of the filth of the flesh. That's not what baptism is for. That's not what it's about. But the answer of a good conscience towards God. And the answer of a good conscience? Yeah, this is the responding to the message of God. Responding to the fact that we have to have salvation from our sins. We have to. And when God says you can be saved by an ark, what does Noah do? He looks at all the details that God gives him, God tells him, and he performs all of it. When God tells us we are saved by faith, yes, but we can see where it's not faith alone. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. Mark 16:16, and you've got a whole host of people that want to take that out of the Bible, but you're going to have to take this out too. You're going to have to take a lot of other scripture out. Is that really the answer of a good conscience? Doing that? No. Responding to scripture is the answer of a good conscience, not destroying it, not editing it, but the answer of a good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And as we said, every major doctrine in the New Testament will refer to or go back to something in the Old Testament to show like a shadow, to show a principle of how this is what was expected in the past, this is what's expected right now. Such as 1 Corinthians chapter 10. That chapter is taken to show that we have to remain faithful to God. And Paul is using the Israel in the wilderness to show all the things that occurred there that should never occurred. Idolatry, adultery, murmuring and complaining, and their bodies were scattered through the wilderness. With some he was not pleased at all. Not at all. Now, this would just addressing Noah in the New Testament. Now we get back to actually our subject, which is the post-flood world. It is, as we talked about, that period just after the flood, really between the flood and Babel, is referred to as, and it's not really that important, as the Arphaxadian period. It's named after Arphaxad, who is the son of Shem. He's born 2 years after the flood, and he's the firstborn of Shem. And here we have, this is Genesis 10, and as we explained last week, this is the spread of mankind after Babel. It is genealogy, but this isn't everything, and we need to make this firm. And the reason I want to make this firm is I had a discussion not too many months ago with an elder in the church who took issue with what I was saying. That there are, Genesis chapter 10, while there are things that occur in Genesis chapter 10 that are before Genesis 11, there are things in Genesis 10, it's genealogy, that take place after Genesis 11, because it shows how they are separated according to their families and their languages. All right, you're not doing that before 11. Genesis 11 starts off with the words, there was one language on the earth. All right, and it's making that point from the first verse of that section, first verse of that chapter, because that's the point being made, is there's one language in this, and everything's going to be changed, and they're going to be scattered. Now, what we're looking at in all this, in this continuation from last week, is what's regarded as the Table of Nations, how everyone was spread. Now, last week, we did Japheth. We're doing this verse by verse. We did Japheth and we did Ham. Now, Japheth, I think, only has 2 verses really concerning those descendants of his. And we see in this Table of Nations that these are ancient names of nations. Tarshish being just one. There's also one that is I think it's Javan, that's the ancient name of Greece. And the coastlands of the Gentiles. This would be, and not all, it doesn't appear that all of his children went toward the coast of the Mediterranean and islands, but some of them did. But then we went to Ham. And with Ham, they are spreading all over. Ham, there's a lot of descendants, a lot of nations that we see out of there. And they're going from to different sections of the world, to different sections. And one of the things, well, we'll get to it in just a second. We're just going to do this first. Acts 17:26, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, on all the face of the earth. That's what he wanted. That's what he wanted from the beginning. And for all the face of the earth, that's what he had to do at Babel to get them out. As we were saying last week, Babel is city number 1 after the flood. There's no telling how many cities there were prior to the flood. Don't know. But Babel is city number 1. They had built a city. They had built or were building their tower. And the idea is to make a name for ourselves. That's what they wanted, to keep everybody localized. Keep everybody there. We're going to make one massive city. And they were witnessing there the advantage that one has from a large population. How many people were there in Babel? Don't know. I have no idea. That's for a later time. But they were seeing that you could have advantages by having a large amount of people together in a city. They were building it. Now, to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. And we see the beginning of this in Genesis chapter 10 as to where they spread. Genesis chapter 11 tells us they spread, but we don't know how they did it from 11. We know more of how they did it in chapter, quite well actually, in chapter 10. Not 11, but 10. Now, let's discuss some things, and I want to reiterate this because you may have missed last week's lesson. But we have Shem, Ham, Japheth, the three sons of Noah and his wife. The three sons. And one can say from Shem came the Jewish people. And that's correct. We have a direct lineage there to the Jewish people. But concerning all the others of Shem, they had more than one line. And they become various other peoples. But with Ham and with Japheth, there is this scattering, yes, but we cannot actually pin the way the races are usually seen among those that study them today is that of three groups, and with some mysteries that they try to solve, because the fact of the matter is there are some peoples that don't fit in any of these groups, like the Aboriginal people in Australia. They don't fit evenly into the way the scholars usually, or the scientists usually want to put things. But three major groups, and you cannot just say, okay, one group came from Shem, one came from Ham, one came from Japheth. That, it doesn't work out so neatly like that at all. There is only humanity. There is no race. There's humanity with different attributes. And as we often say, that's a good thing that we have different attributes. The fact is, it proves a very strong genetic code, and also it's easier to identify folks. It'd be hard to identify any of you if we all looked precisely the same. We'd have to do something to make ourselves look different from everybody else. But with this, we see that there will be a continual mixing of people through time, such as what we see in Genesis chapter 10 does not account for the Arabic people today. Why? There are people who, in Genesis chapter 10, they did go to the Arabic peninsula. They did go down there. But that is not what we refer to as the Arabic people today, because the Arabic people wouldn't come around for quite a number of more years, of where you have an Esau. And Esau and his wife, who happens to be Egyptian, there you have the Arabic people. And they're coming later in time, as will be the case among a lot of folks. This is the beginning of nations, but there's going to be an intermingling. As we mentioned last week, people will wander. People will be forced to move, or just want to move. They'll want to move it. Things did not go well over here. Maybe there was a drought. Maybe there was a blight. Maybe things just, there is something bad happening over here. Therefore, we've got to move. Well, they move somewhere else. They meet other people. And they can either be wiped out, or there is an intermingling. And quite often, there is an intermingling of people. And that, once again, is a good thing. As last week we were talking about these DNA tests. And the DNA tests are more entertaining than anything else. You can do it, you cannot do it. It really doesn't matter. But it's more just for fun than anything else. But one thing that you will find out in it, and it is true, is that the likelihood that you're 100% anything is highly unlikely. Highly. And that's good. You don't want to be 100% of one group, because that means you are the product of a kind of a genetic dead end. You don't want these tight-knit groups that happen to be still in the world, very, very tight-knit groups, such as your Hasidic communities. They marry among themselves, and there are complications because of marrying among yourselves. And there are other places. They're not the only ones, but there are definite physical problems that occur because of that. You don't want to be 100% anything. But there has been a mixing of people go on everywhere. And it is a good thing. Like, there will always be a Romeo and a Juliet. Despite battling families, there will always be the Romeo and the Juliet. There will always be the Boaz and the Ruth. There will always be people like that. And there's this mixing that goes on. Now, we're discussing here, we didn't finish Ham. I forgot about that. We didn't finish Ham. This Cush, Cush is a son of Ham. And this is the sixth son of Ham, and it's Nimrod. We did discuss him last week, but we want to discuss him again. The beginning of his kingdom, as it says, Genesis 10, verse 7, is Babel. We have an entire section here, as you can call it, with all these other names. You have, they're just a list of sons. Okay? Not necessarily what they did, not necessarily, but a listing of names. With Cush, with Nimrod anyway, with Nimrod, a son of Cush, we see what he did. And here is truly an extraordinary man. Was he a wicked man? I can't say that. I don't know. He was a great hunter, but he had to be a great leader, because the beginning of his kingdom is Babel. That means he was king of Babel. He was the king, the first king, this side of the flood. How many were before? Don't know. But on this side of the flood, he was the first king. Now, we see where he goes beyond Babel to Erech, Akkad, Calneh, and the land of Shinar. Then Assyria, Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, Rezin. This man is extraordinary. He's got to be. Because he is the king of Babel, but you can't be king of Babel for very long, because Babel isn't going to last for very long. Did he come up with the idea of the tower? Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. It could have been anybody that came up with that idea. Obviously, it wasn't going to work to have everyone in Babel. And, of course, they're looking at it from one standpoint, but God is looking at things from a completely different standpoint. He doesn't want everybody under one government. That would be a very bad thing. And he knows it. To have everyone in Babel would be a bad idea, because what happens while Nimrod may be good, I don't know, Nimrod may be good, what happens with the next king and the next king and the next king? Soon you're going to have somebody, like the thing is, absolute power corrupts absolutely. You're going to have this horrid king come in, and you're going to have the entire world population under that king. That's no good. Spread out. There's plenty of land spread out. So we have Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar or Syria. He is the founder of Nineveh, no small city. Nineveh would be around for a long time until we get to the Babylonians, when the Babylonians will destroy them. Babylonians have been under the thumb of the Assyrians, and they are feeling their oats, and they're going to be the ones rising up against the Assyrians, and Nineveh will be destroyed then. But that is a long time that Nineveh exists. And, you know, it's amazing that in places such as the British Museum, there is a library from Nineveh resting there. And there are so many clay tablets. They don't have enough resources, enough people most of those clay tablets have never been read. They've never been much less translated. They've never been read. There's so many of them. And of course, you've got to learn cuneiform in order to do that. That would be, they had a unique language in Nineveh, and they had a written language in Nineveh. And that's a different language than what we find in Egypt in the same time period. There's this different language that we find in other places. Now let's continue on. This is now Mizraim. That's the next one that we see in this, and here are his 6 sons, Ludum, and that looks like Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. So that's right across northern Africa. Anamim, Egypt. The Anami is the old name for the Egyptians and Egypt. And you know, we said it last week, we need to say it again, that you have this spreading out of people. Just because you have one people that may go to, let's say, India, doesn't mean there's no room for anybody else in India. Yeah, you have that's a subcontinent. The same thing like with Egypt or with Ethiopia or some of these other places, where there's room there, and you can have several who go into those places and inhabit those places. Lehabim looks like eastern Libya. Nephutuhim, southern Egypt. Pathrusim of Pathros or upper Egypt. Kasuluhim, the Philistines, and the Caphtorim. Yeah, these are getting difficult. And then you have this list. Sidon, of course, that's the Sidonians. Heth, the Hittites. The Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivite, the Archite, the Sinite, the Avidite, the Zimmerite, the Hamathite. Okay? Now, all of these are descendants of Canaan in this. And these are your Canaanites. Now, I'm just going to mention Sidonians and the Hittites. Sidonians and the Hittites. This is what I mean by a mixing of people. The Sidonians being Phoenicians. Sidonians are not the only Phoenicians. You have Tyre and Sidon. But the Phoenician people, and they're people that live on the coast. There is very good evidence, and I'm not going to press this, but other than to say there's really good evidence that the Phoenicians actually made it to the English coast. That there are things on the English coast in certain sections that look like things the Phoenicians were doing and designs that the Phoenicians were doing. And could it be that a seafaring people made it all the way to England? Yeah, That's what you do. That'd be easy to do. Actually, just make your way right out of the Mediterranean, take a right and head up the coast, see what's happening up there. You'll find England. So could it be that your very ancient English people were first, or very soon, somewhere in that ancient world, Phoenicians? Yeah, it's very possible that they weren't just visitors there, that they may have very well set up camp. And if there was a reason to stay, why not stay? Why not inhabit up there? The Hittites. Now this is another one of those things of where there's evidence for it, and you can either take it or leave it, but it does show that there is a mixing of people, that the Hittites, according to some historians, were later known by the Romans as the Franks. Well, who are the Franks and where do they end up? It's known as France. So the Hittites become the Franks. They're called that by the Romans in time, and the Franks moving their way over into France. That's very plausible. Very plausible. As we have been saying, if we could see a map, and it would be impossible to have one that's just gets everything. But if we could see a map of migrations through history, not just from Babel, but migrations through history, we would see that it looks quite like a blender. Okay, that it's just people moving all over the place, is what it is. And so it is very possible that your Phoenicians were up in England, that the Hittites finally made their way into France. It's very possible that occurred. And so with Ham, we just see this, and we didn't cover everything from Ham this week. You'll see that India is included in this. That was from that's from last week discussions, and that matter of fact, you have 3 sons that are move off, or it appears that they moved off into India. And so Ham, that's a big group. Ham has gone into a number of places. Now we get to Shem, and Shem is gold because Shem is going to be the direct line to Abraham. And from this point, we're going to see gold, some gold names in this, and that would show the line heading to Abraham. And of course, we see Abraham, when we first find him, he's at Ur of the Chaldees, when we first find him. So it would only make sense that those prior to his birth had remained in that area. And with Babel, and you can't get this from the biblical text, but with Babel, it appears from archaeological evidence that, and yes, there is a Babel. Yes, there is an archaeological site that is regarded as the ancient city of Babel. And yes, there is a big foundation left that is more than likely the tower, or what remains of it, of the tower. That you have this group that, let me finish my sentence in that. My thought is that it appears from archaeological evidence that Babel was abandoned. That everything seems to be booming right along. We see the mass production of certain items, pottery. We see the mass production of these things, and it looks like, yeah, there is a thriving population here, and then it's gone. And there's nobody that comes back to Babel, at least not enough to make any kind of archaeological evidence for it, for like another couple hundred or more years. They're gone. And in my thought, until I heard that, in my thinking, I thought somebody would have stayed in Babel, right? I mean, everybody else is leaving. Why do I have to leave? Okay, if everybody else is going and I can convince my language group to stay here, why not stay here? Evidently they didn't for whatever reasons. They didn't, and perhaps they couldn't. But they all moved. Every one of them moved. And so it would appear in the archaeological evidence. Now, we have Elam. Elam is going to become the Elamites. We have Asher. Asher, the Assyrians. Now, we talked about I thought Nineveh, or rather Nimrod, built Nineveh, which is the capital of Assyria. What's all that about? Well, like I said, you have a mixing of people. You have people that will go in different directions. And sometimes they will collide and they will become one people. And Arphaxad, you have the Chaldeans and the Hebrews. Lud is Persia. Aram is the Syrians, not to be confused with the Assyrians. Syria is with us today. Assyria is not, as a nation, is not with us today. Then with Aram, you have Uz, which is Trachonitis and Damascus. And Uz of Idumea is a known place. Hul is also Syria. Gether is Kol Syria, or Kole Syria, which is part of Syria and Lebanon today. Mash is Armenia, another heading off in that direction. Then we have Arphaxad and Salah. They are obviously staying in the Shinar Valley, because this is where we're going to pick up with Abraham, because these are the ancestors of Abraham. So these are staying in that Shinar Valley, evidently not at Babel, but they're still in the area. And we have hang on. We have also Peleg with Eber. We have Peleg, and bringing this in in his days, the earth was divided. And we have Eleg, with Eber, we have Peleg, and we have Joktan. And their dwelling place was from Mesha as you go to Sephar, the mountains of the east. That's Joktan heads to Arabia, and this is telling where they went, Joktan. But we want to deal with Peleg for a minute, because it says, for in his days the earth was divided. Now, we spoke about this, that it is a common thing to put this with Genesis 11 and the earth being divided in the languages, of which that's what I've always thought, and I have no reason to change that. Others have thought it to mean that of Pangea splitting apart. And I'm not going to say that's not the interpretation, or that's not a viable interpretation. I'm not going to say that because I really don't know precisely what it means, but I think more likely it concerns Babel, because that's where we're headed. We're finishing up with chapter 10 and about to head to chapter 11, where everything is going to be divided. And obviously, whatever this earth being divided meant, it was enough to name this child Division, because that's what his name means. That's the Hebrew, his Hebrew name there, and it means division. And if this is Babel, it does mean that Babel was, the splitting of Babel would have had to have occurred very close to when this child was born. Very close. It had to have happened before he was born. It had to have. Otherwise, you wouldn't name a child after something that's already occurred after they've been born. You wouldn't, you have a 5-year-old and you say, okay, we're going to change your name now to Division, because that's what this would be, what he was named when he was born. So it would have to be 101 years after the flood. Now, if we consider the longevity of people that was still around. That is how long they lived. Because at 101 years after the flood, Noah would still be around. His 3 sons would still be around. All their wives would presumably, very good, still be around. Could you have a significant population to where you could begin a Babel? And the answer is yeah. In 101 years, you could have enough to where you're saying, we are building a city right here. It wouldn't be the size of one of our cities today. It couldn't be. But it would be enough to where they could decide, it would be enough to where not everyone had to farm. Not everyone had to hunt or to fish or to see to it that all the things necessary for survival only were taken care of. That you could have potters. And you could have those who are going to be building things. Whereas all the other things could be purchased by those who are doing it and doing it well. A farmer, a hunter, a fisher, whatever. All these others. You could have a significant population big enough to where that could occur. Now, the idea, once again, it doesn't matter how many there were at Babel. It's the idea that God was against. And the idea is we all stay here. We make a name for ourselves, which means that anyone who's not here at Babel, and that is a distinct possibility, there would be those that weren't at Babel, that they would probably want to come here. Or also to keep everyone from splitting away and creating their own city and their own kingdom. All right? Keep everyone here. That's what God was against. He was against that. So it really doesn't matter how big the population was. He's stopping that idea. And he also acknowledges in chapter 11, God does acknowledge that with one language, they can do precisely what they're wanting to do. He does acknowledge that. And that's why he creates the impossibility of continuing in that by these languages, that you're not going to figure that out soon. You're not going to figure that out. And it all breaks apart. And because they can't live in the same place coordinating anything. They can't do it because they've been divided up by language. But now we come to Joktan, 13 sons, and these are all, or many of them, can be seen as very ancient tribal names in Arabia, and this would be pre-Arabic. But they're still there. They're there. And these went off into the Arabian area. Now for Shem, we have basically this is where they go, or so it would appear that they went with Shem. You have a large contingent. Anyway, well, I say a large contingent. You have a large contingent going to Arabia, but you have this direct line heading to Abraham. They're staying in the area, still in the area of Babel, where Babel was, still in that area, because that's where, as we're saying, we have Abraham at Ur of the Chaldees. All right, that's not far. Ur is not far from where Babel happened to be. But let's look at, we need to finish out Genesis 10:30, finishing out this chapter. And their dwelling place was from Mesha as you go towards Safar and the mountains of the east. And just want to mention that word Safar, that's where we get the word Sephardic Jew. But needless to say, these were not the ancestors to the Jews. That while Shem was, this this side of Shem's descendants were not. But these were the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages, in their lands, according to their nations. And then we come from, let's do the next verse. These were their family. Wait a minute, what did I do? These were their families of the sons of Noah, right, according to their generations in their nation. And from these nations were divided on the earth after the flood. Okay, so here we have the end of chapter 10 coming to chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. Okay, so we know that chapter 10, at least this ladder of each of these descendants, spread out all over the place. Because even when we start at the beginning of the chapter with Japheth, we see where they're spreading across the Mediterranean. They're occupying islands. They're occupying other places on the Mediterranean coast and other places, some going inland. Here we can see where this is discussing what occurred in the long term. Now we come to chapter 11 as to how it occurred. And as we said, with chapter 11 doesn't tell us where everybody went, just that they did. It doesn't tell us how they went, but that they did go. With these names in chapter 10, we have very good indication as to where they went, because we have certain ancient names. Cush, that's an ancient name for Ethiopia. It's like we were talking about an ancient name of Greece, ancient name of Spain, ancient name of, I had it in my mind, anyway, of Egypt. All of these. Now, how does Moses know these things? He seems to be well educated in things that occurred centuries before he came around. How does he know this? Well, it's not him that knows it. It's God that knows it. And God, of course, is inspiring him to do these things. And you know, those that want to speak against the flood, they never address these things. They never address it. They have to go and talk about animals on the ark, that there's not enough room on the ark. Or they've got to, which we've addressed that. They've got to talk about some kind of impracticality. They've got to talk about some kind of impossibility without really looking at the evidence. But, all right, I appreciate everybody being here. And this does end our lessons on the flood. I could go on to Babel, but actually we had a lesson not too long ago concerning Babel. But thank you very much, everybody.